Right, so pollsters appear to have egg on their faces again. The mainstream media have been handed their backsides and the left appear to be triumphant. If only I was talking about the UK, but sadly I'm not. The French election exit poll has handed a big fat shock to the status quo, as predictions of the far right taking power were way off the mark, and the left coalition that managed to unite itself quite quickly in the wake of Emmanuel Macron calling a snap general election, and by snap I mean literally 2 weeks of campaigning, and looked set to be the ones to take power instead. We could well be set to look at what a proper left administration across the water can do, as Labour voices here bleat the same tired old Tory line of there being no money left to do anything to excuse more Tory austerity coming down the road rather than find money by implementing a wealth tax. But equally, Keir Starmer was quick to go on record as saying he could work with a Marine Le Pen French administration. So why hasn't he said likewise yet about the left? Right, so Marine Le Pen, head honcho of the National Front, renamed National Rally, as if that really makes a difference. We knew she was still, so did French voters. There's been a floods of tears, as the final exit poll in the French election showed that she wasn't on the cusp of leading her rancid power to party after all, as the first round of voting implied that she was. Her awful outfit pushed into third place, in fact, still coming behind Macron's centrists, but crucially, he's lost too, as the coalition of 5 left-wing parties topped the exit poll and looked set to take power. So instead of the far-right ruling, socialism has won through, you might think, and did so by setting their differences aside and coming together to defeat the politics of hate. No one party or coalition, it seems, has done enough to win an outright majority, though. So Macron, with 3 years of his presidency still left to serve, and his prime minister from his party having already resigned, has a choice to do a deal with the left coalition or rumble on with a new prime minister with a lot of hostile MPs to his legislative plans. He took a gamble that people would pick him over the far right, and instead they backed the left. Centrists just never seem to see that coming, never see it as something people will legitimately vote for. Whilst he mulls over his options, though, Keir Starmer has been conspicuously quiet on this matter of the left surge in France. Some in the media will be saying how pleased Labour will be, but this is not a left-wing Labour Party. The likes of left French figures like Jean-Luc Mélenchon prefer to hang with the likes of this bearded fella who is now the independent MB for Islington North, pictured here as both were as part of the South African delegation behind their genocide case against Israel at The Hague last January. No, Starmer is far more a Macron type. Macron himself directly compared to Tony Blair when he first got elected, and his popularity has sunk as a result since, much like Blair's did. Well, Starmer's popularity has sunk before he even reached power, hasn't it? The first incoming Prime Minister in British history, apparently, to have seen his majority reduce. And it didn't just reduce, it was more than halved, instead of increase, as you would think would obviously have to be the case. And just as we've seen centrists here do, when the Liberal Democrats supported the Tories and put them into power in 2010, preferring that option to the left, and also in that line of thinking we can include the ridiculousness later on of Jo Swinson, remember her, refusing to countenance a provisional government led by Corbyn over one led by Boris Johnson. It's what centrists do. They always seem to end up enabling the right. Case in point was that following those initial first round results, which apparently had the far right of Marine Le Pen front and centre and on course for victory, so it seemed then, Keir Starmer readily announced at that time that he could work with her, saying, "I will work with any government in Europe and across the world if we are elected in to serve the country. For me, that's what serious government is about. So yes, we will work with whoever. I do think it is important that we make the progressive case to meet the challenges that we face across Europe and across the world." Well, of course, he has now been elected, but Le Pen has, well, her party certainly hasn't been. And conspicuously, he has not, at this moment in time, at this time of writing, repeated that mantra in light of the left taking a legislative lead in France now, as it appears they very much now will be able to do. And when Starmer said that, there was no countenancing the left actually winning in France at that point, so that might have been very easy for him to do, but does he still mean it? Notably, Starmer said it voiced his support for Marine Le Pen's awful party the same week he made such grossly offensive comments about Bangladeshis and in regards to what policy area he felt he could work with Le Pen on. He gave stopping small boat crossings as his example, because these people, desperate as they are, cannot be demonised enough. People desperately trying to get here for their better life, fleeing goodness knows what, migrants, refugees, however you wish to term them. You don't know their case until they've had their case heard and made it. And it very much plays to the right wing to follow that narrative. He desperately courted that in the general election, as we know, but which, given his party only managed to increase its vote share by 1.6% over 2019, the Starmeroids are having a very hard time accepting their man actually did so badly and is only in power due to our crackpot electoral system, as the Tories, of course, lost 20% of their own vote, a lot of that going to Reform UK. Arguably, you could say, with all this talk of migrants and the small boat crossings and the tub thumping for the right wing there, that was those votes that Starmer was trying to appeal to, and he gained sod all of them in the way of those Tory votes and the votes that he was chasing, attacking migrants and refugees arriving by small boat to claim asylum. And as such, he's just made himself look rancid and racist, just as bad as the Tories all reform in that regard, and to no political benefit for himself whatsoever. There's no political gain for him in it, so I do hope he changes his tune. If his advisers now aren't telling him to shut up about such things and forget chasing right-wing votes, they are as deluded and politically inept as their boss certainly is. Now, I've no doubt in the coming days, when Starmer finally stops dragging his heels, that he will end up saying similarly regarding what these shock results in France that nobody saw coming with regards to the new left-wing direction are. He probably will come out and say that he can work with them. I would like to also to find out on what particular policy areas he feels he can work with the left on, because he was quite happy to name small boats when it came to the far right. What is it you fancy that you can work with the left when you have frankly demonised them and purged them in this country? Will we even accept a word of it, or will we just laugh about it when he comes out with it? I fancy it'll be the latter. I'll certainly look forward to French responses to that as well. But whereas he saw an opportunity for shared policy with the far right over those small boat crossings, he is going to struggle, given the initial policy announcement, certainly, that's been made by Jean-Luc Mélenchon, leader of the left-wing La France Insoumise party, or France Unbowed, one of those left coalition parties, and that party's representative in the French Parliament, Mathilde Panot, who have announced that they will seek French recognition of the state of Palestine. Oh dear, Keith, what will you do if they do that then? Well, Starmer might now rue his backtracking during the election campaign as far as state recognition of Palestine goes, because that'll be one heck of a U-turn if he does so on this now to court the French left. Because although a lot of media are still saying he backs this, and ostensibly he does, his backing for it is still conditional, however. And the condition he has placed on it is that Hamas unconditionally release all of their hostages. No Israel get out of Gaza as well. No end to the fighting even. No release of Palestinian hostages that the media always refer to, or Palestinian prisoners, I should say, referred to as hostages. So in too many cases, their only crime is actually their own existence. 3 of whom were released, incidentally, by Israel at the Kerem Shalom crossing yesterday, where Israel, Gaza and Egyptian borders all meet at one point. And they were then murdered as they walked away. They were gunned down by the Israelis. Now, the condition Starmer demands is just that Hamas must give up their hostages. So he's in a bind where French relations are seemingly from the get-go here, going forwards. He has his pro-Israel lobbyists and party funders, paymasters as they've proven to be, to look after now, after all, to represent, and just to make things tougher as Starmer struggles to get his head around how to keep Israel happy whilst still maintaining a relationship with one of our closest European neighbours, and with whom migration is such an overblown but massive issue of his own making in no small part, determined to ape the Tories on that matter as he is. Israel, well, they're fuming over the direction France has taken. Israel, like Macron, he likes to call the left anti-Semitic, you see, he was their sort. But if the tweet put out by Israel's Minister for Diaspora and Combating Anti-Semitism, because of course they have such a thing, Amishai Shikli is anything to go by, they are in a rather teasy mood, and for all the usual reasons. I see here some clowns celebrating the achievement of Mélenchon, the French version of Jeremy Corbyn, a hater of Israel in heart and soul, who refused to condemn the Shia events in October and define Hamas as a terrorist organisation. The Red-Green Alliance will lead Europe to a deep, very deep abyss. Well, it seems Jeremy Corbyn still lives rent-free in the heads of Israelis too. It's not just in this country. State recognition of territory they occupy illegally clearly terrifies them. Still, there are those who consider Macron's gamble to have worked, though, to keep the far right out, as if that is why he did it. He called this election out of arrogance. With the far right gaining popularity, he dared the French people to vote him out and them in, he played a game of bulldog with them, if you like. Insofar as them being kept out, sure, that worked out fine, but only because the left united under one banner. And as such, Macron has lost something like 80 seats, and his centrist Renaissance party came second. The far right have indeed been kept out, but from a certain political point of view, so has he. It won't stop our media false equivalencing Starmer with the French left, though, and really he is another Macron. He is therefore another Blair, and this is nothing we didn't already know, surely. I look forward to seeing what diplomatic knots he now has to tie himself in. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation explaining the truth behind that other election we've just had, our own, and the reality that Labour really didn't gain votes to win a majority, rather they lost votes, just that the Tories lost even more. And oh look, we've suddenly won all these seats despite that. Our electoral system is a joke. Democracy, it ain't, when Starmer literally only won 20% of the voting public support. Get the details of that analysis here, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.